Hey everyone, it's Undead Aaron back again. So today I want to show you the Signet Corruption build I was playing back in August before I moved, and I've played a few matches with it recently. It still seems very solid with all the Heart of Thorns changes. So let's get started with that and also show you some of its variations. First off, this build is like most Necro builds, Minion Master excluded. To be a good Necro, you want to maintain good awareness and position, and keep an eye on enemy and ally boons as well as conditions. This build is kind of a build and burst playstyle where you are relying on might stacks to deal big damage with Life Blast and Necrotic Bite. You'll not have as much control as a Necromancer, but you are going to be tankier, and if you use your Signets and Dark Path well, you can turn enemy stability into fear for extra CC. This build is played with Dagger, Warhorn, and Staff, and Celestial Amulet and Rune of Strength or Rune of the Pack for your equipment. Taking energy on both weapon sets for the extra dodge roll is always a good idea in my opinion, and for your other sigils, I like Blood on my Dagger and Leeching on my Staff for the heal, but really this is all about personal preference here. As far as how this plays, I generally open with my Staff set and keep my range if possible, trying to stay up on high ground and just using AoE marks to open my fight and gain some life force. You're going to want to switch to Dagger and move into melee range to help finish off a target, or if you are in a 1 versus 1 situation, you're probably going to want to get to your Dagger fairly quickly. Building might stacks not only increases your direct damage, but it also increases your condition damage. So again, stacking might is very important in this build, but converting enemy boons into conditions is equally important. So there's a lot of things to kind of manage here, micromanage here, and it can take a little while getting used to it, but it's actually a really solid, really fun build. You're going to be using Plague for your elite. Plague of Darkness is going to help you buy time, secure stomps, and reses, and it's also going to shut down big burst skills from the enemy team like Lich Form and Rampage. So definitely Plague of Darkness is a priority when you're entering your elite. But Plague of Pestilence is also really good, especially if you see an enemy trying to flee from a battle. Okay, so for traits, you're going to take Spite, Curses, and Soul Reaping. So let's start with Spite first. The first minor trait is Reaper's Might, which grants 1 stack of Might every time you land a Life Blast from Death Shroud. So this is like your primary way of stacking Might early in a fight. For your first choice, go with Spiteful Renewal for an autocast minor heal. The next up is Death's Embrace, which inflicts vulnerability against foes below 33% health and increases your downstate damage. For your next choice, both Chill of Death and Rending Shroud are good options, so pick the one that suits you the best. The next minor trait is actually very important. This is called Siphoned Power, which grants stacks of might versus enemies we strike that are below 50% health. The amount of might you can generate using Necrotic Slash on targets below 50% health is actually pretty amazing. Setting up Burst with Wail of Doom and or Dark Path works really well. Keep in mind Wail of Doom is unblockable and will interrupt an enemy's blocking skill. Finally, we have Signet of Suffering, which is really the key to this build. It gives every Signet you activate a reduced cooldown, it makes them convert 2 boons into 2 conditions on the enemy, and it also makes Signets grant 3 stacks of might when activated. Okay, moving on to Curses, Barb Precision gives your critical hits a chance to cause bleeding. For your first choice, go with Plague Sending. When you have 3 or more conditions on you, you will automatically send up to 5 of those conditions on an enemy target. It's automatic, it's on a 24-second cooldown. Furious Demise is next, which grants Fury while entering Death Shroud. This will bring your total crit to just above 50% for a few seconds while in Death Shroud. For your next choice, all 3 of these choices actually have their merits. I personally like Path of Corruption, but with so many ways to turn boons into conditions already, some of you may find this is a bit overkill, especially if you take a 4th Signet over Spectral Armor. In that case, Master of Corruption will give your Plague a faster cooldown, and will also make any of your Plagues apply all of them at once, plus Torment, which is pretty cool. Your other choice is Terror, which makes Fear deal damage, which may at first seem like a Necromancer choice. However, you actually can get the damage on Fear up past 1100 depending on how much might you have stacked when you cast it. Also remember, Reaper's Mark and Doom are not your only sources of Fear in this build, as Stability converts into Fear, and you have plenty of ways of converting boons into conditions. Next up is Target the Weak, which increases crit chance for every condition on the enemy. For your final choice in Curses, which was once called Grandmaster Training, both Weakening Shroud and Parasitic Contagion are good, but this build already has so much survivability, I recommend going with Weakening Shroud. Gluttony increases the amount of life force we gain from all skills that generate life force. For your next choice, it seems tempting to go with Unyielding Blast, but trust me, you are going to want Soul Marks in this build. And Speed of Shadows is not necessary, as we have both an active and passive speed boost from our skills. Next up is Last Gasp, which essentially auto-casts Spectral Armor for you when you drop below 50% health, and it can occur every 50 seconds, which is pretty cool. It also auto-breaks a stun when it happens. For your next choice, go with Vital Persistence. This is going to make it much easier to stay in Death Shroud for both defensive and offensive purposes, and I think it's the only choice here. Next is Strength of Undeath, which gives us a slight damage and life force buff while we maintain life force above 50%. For your final choice, Foot in the Grave turns Death Shroud into a stun breaker. And being that Death Shroud is on a 10-second cooldown, I believe that is still the shortest stun breaker in the game. It also grants you stability when entering Death Shroud. Doomfire is also a good option for turning up the pressure while building might stacks early in a fight, but I don't really recommend it versus melee heavy teams, and it's not as good as Foot in the Grave in a 1 versus 1 fight. So most of the time you're going to want to go with Foot in the Grave. Alright, so there's not a lot of room for utility variation here, but on your utility bar, for your heal, go with Signet of Vampirism. Also keep in mind with this Signet, when you mark your enemy with the Signet, allies hitting that foe will siphon health as well as you. This combined with a well-placed Mark of Blood can really help out an ally and change a fight into his favor, keep him alive. Signet of the Locust grants us our speed boost passively, but when it is used, it siphons health from enemies in an area around us. Because of the way this Signet works, you don't really require a target, so you will also turn 2 boons into 2 conditions on every enemy affected by it. I personally really like Signet of Spite here, however Signet of Undeath can be a good option. Spectral Armor or Spectral Walk are also really popular choices for the extra stun breaker. For tips on using Spectral Walk, check out the video Mastering Terra 4 mobility tricks on this channel. Finally, we have Plague Signet, which draws conditions from allies to us, which is awesome on so many levels. The first is obvious in that we are aiding our teammates, but what's really great about this ability is as a Necromancer we have the ability to turn conditions back to the enemy in so many ways. This Signet is also an instant cast and a stun breaker, and its active ability sends up to 5 conditions to our target. In this footage, I really just want to point out the importance of not overextending, and even making a few mistakes here. You can see I was able to recover, get back to high ground, and reset. Here my ally goes down, and this is one of my absolute favorite ways to use Dark Path. I bounce to the enemy to get close to my ally, and I manage to get off the res. Now that we have a big numbers advantage, the point is ours.
The waterfall is yours.
She'll have to hit much harder.
In this 1 versus 1 with this engineer, you can see how for every boon he has, you have a way to remove and counter it with your signets. When you run out of signets, I just decided to hit him with Dark Path, constantly using his boons against him and just building might. And now he's under the threshold, and you can see I've broken 20 stacks of might right here. At this point, everything I'm doing is dealing just lots of damage to him, but rather than going for the kill here, I want to put focus on holding this point. So with this turning into a 3 versus 1 situation, I decided to use Plague to buy time until I can get some backup. The backup never really came, but as Plague expires, you can see my health is too low to actually attempt to cast my heal, so I'm just going to drop right into Death Shroud. Here you can really see how powerful Vital Persistence and Celestial Amulet are, and that's one of my favorite things I love about this build, is how all the traits, gear, and skills synergize together so well, whether it's being offensive, defensive, or just spreading out conditions. Here's a few more fun team fight highlights from the other night. I hope this video helped you guys get a little insight on how to play the Celestial Signet Corruption Necromancer, but most of all, I hope you guys have fun with it. I'm Undead Aaron, as always, thanks for watching.
across the quarry.
Reef the whirlwind.
Your team is victorious. You've taken the graveyard.
Damn. Ugh. Blah, 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 blah. Dooba dooba.